The ping of another delivery notification cut through the hum of traffic. Maya swiped without looking. Thy food, Riverside Apartments building. She knew the place. Everyone who worked late shifts in this part of town knew Riverside. Built in the 60s, the complex sprawled across 3 blocks like a concrete maze. The buildings all looked identical, weathered gray facades, narrow hallways that smelled of dust and old carpet, and elevators that groaned like dying animals. Maya had been there at least a dozen times in the past month. It paid the bills while she finished her degree, and the tips were decent enough to keep her going. She pulled up to the loading zone at 9:47 p.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few scattered cars under flickering streetlights. Building K loomed ahead, its lobby windows glowing with that sickly fluorescent light that made everything look slightly wrong. The intercom crackled when she pressed it. 7th floor, a tired voice said. The door buzzed open. Inside, the lobby was exactly as she remembered: scuffed linoleum, a dying potted plant in the corner, elevator doors scarred with decades of scratches. She pressed the call button and heard the familiar mechanical wheeze somewhere above. This elevator was old school, the kind with a metal accordion gate inside, solid outer doors, the kind that clunked and shuddered between floors. Maya had always found it unsettling, but it worked. Mostly. The doors opened with a metallic shriek. She stepped inside, pressed 7, and watched the doors close. The cabin lurched upward with its usual reluctance. It was on the way down, after dropping off the order that Ms. Chen from 5 flagged her down in the hallway. You're the delivery girl, right? The elderly woman was shuffling toward her apartment, arms full of grocery bags. Yes, ma'am. Need help with those? No. I just wanted to say Ms. Chen glanced at the elevator doors. Be careful with that thing. Especially late at night. Maya smiled politely. It's pretty old, ho. Old isn't the problem. Miss Chen's voice dropped. It has a mind of its own. Last week it went down to the basement by itself. Doors opened, nobody there. My neighbor won't use it after dark anymore. Probably just a short circuit or something. Maybe. Miss Chen shifted her bags. But circuits don't breathe. Before Maya could respond, the old woman had disappeared into her apartment, leaving Maya alone in the corridor. Weird. But tenants in old buildings always had their superstitions. Creaky pipes became ghosts. Faulty wiring became hauntings. Maya had heard it all. She pressed the elevator button again. 3 deliveries later, it was past 11. Maya's legs etched, and her phone battery was down to 15%. One more run and she could call it a night. The notification came through: Riverside Apartments again. Building K. 9th floor. She almost groaned. Back to the creepy elevator. But the tip was good $20 for a 10-minute drive. She grabbed the order and headed out. This time, Riverside felt different. The parking lot was completely empty. No lights in most windows. The lobby door took 3 tries to open, like it didn't want to let her in. Inside, the silence was thick. No distant taps, no footsteps overhead, no hum of conversation. just the buzz of fluorescent lights and the faint drip of water somewhere in the walls. Maya pressed the elevator button and waited. And waited. The mechanical sounds above were slower than usual, like the cabin was moving through thick syrup. When the doors finally opened, the interior light was dimmer than she remembered, more low, more shadowy. She stepped inside. Pressed 9. The doors closed. The elevator started moving before she took her finger off the button. Maya blanked. Had she pressed it twice? She must have. The panel showed 9 lit up, and the floor indicator was climbing to 2, 3, 4. But something felt wrong. The acceleration was smoother than usual, almost deliberate. The cabin didn't lurch or groan. It glided. 5, 6. Then it stopped. Floor 7. Maya hadn't pressed 7. She stared at the panel. Only the 9 was lit. The doors opened. The hallway beyond was completely dark. Not just dim pitch black. No emergency lights, no glow from apartment doors. Just an empty throat of darkness. Maya's finger flew to the closed door button. She jabbed it repeatedly. The doors began to close, agonizingly slow. As the gap narrowed, she could have sworn she heard something in that darkness. A shuffle. A breathe. The doors sealed shut. The elevator continued upward. 8, 9. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Malfunction. Had to be. Old building, old wiring. Happens all the time. The 9th floor was lit, thank God. She practically lunged out of the cabin, found the right apartment, and delivered the food to a guy in a bathrobe who barely looked up from his phone. "Elevator working okay?" he asked absently. "Yeah. Fine. Lucky. Things been acting weird all week. Management says they're gonna fix it." He shrugged and closed the door. Maya stood alone in the hallway, staring at the elevator doors. Going back down meant getting in that thing again. She thought about the stairs. 9 flights. Her legs already hurt. The elevator dinged, as if reading her mind. The doors were open. Waiting. Maya stepped inside. She pressed L for lobby. The doors closed. The cabin began to descend. And then it stopped. Floor 6. Maya's stomach dropped. "Come on," she muttered, pressing L again. Nothing. She pressed it 3 more times, harder each time. The doors opened. Another dark hallway. But this time, she heard something clearly, a distant metallic clang, like a door slamming in a basement somewhere below. No. No, no, no. She stabbed the closed door button frantically. The doors didn't move. The elevator just sat there, open, like an invitation. Maya's eyes darted around the cabin. The emergency phone. She grabbed the receiver dead. No yell tone. She pulled out her cell phone. On bar. She tried to call 911, but the call wouldn't connect. That's when she noticed the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. It was a small dome, probably connected to a feed in the building's maintenance office. If something was wrong, someone would see. Someone was watching. That thought calmed her. She wasn't alone. Not really. She looked up at the camera, and that's when she saw it. On the reflective surface of the dome, warped and distorted but unmistakable, movement behind her. A shape. A shadow. Closer than it should be. Maya spun around. The cabin was empty. She was alone. Her breath came fast and shallow. She turned back to the camera, stared at the dome's reflection. There it was again, a figure, just over her left shoulder, tall and still. She whipped around again. Nothing. The cabin was 4 feet wide. There was nowhere to hide. But the shadow was there. In the reflection. Not in the cabin. Her mind screamed at her to get out, but the doors were still open to that pitch-black hallway. And something about that darkness felt worse than staying inside. She pressed every button on the panel, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them. Close the goddamn doors. Finally, they began to move. As the gap narrowed, the hallway seemed to exhale a soft, wet sound that made Maya's skin crawl. The doors sealed. The elevator lurched and started going down. Fast. Too fast. Maya grabbed the railing as the floor numbers dropped. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But it didn't stop. The panel went dark, then flickered back on, showing a single letter. Basement. No, no, no. Maya slammed the emergency stop button. Nothing. She hit every button on the panel. Nothing. The elevator plunged downward, the cables screaming, the walls shuddering. Then, with a sickening jolt, it stopped. The lights dimmed to almost nothing, just a faint yellow glow that barely reached the corners. Her phone screen showed no signal. No bars. Nothing. The doors opened halfway and stuck. Beyond them, a basement service level. Exposed pipes running along a low concrete ceiling. Cables snaking across the floor. Emergency lights glowing dull red in the distance. Everything covered in a film of grime and condensation. And it was silent. Completely silent. Maya didn't move. Every instinct told her to stay in the elevator, to wait too. She heard it. Breathing. Not her own. Somewhere out there in the basement, slow and steady. The sound of someone trying to stay quiet. Her blood turned to ice. Hello. Her voice cracked. Is someone there? The breathing stopped. Then, from the shadows between 2 thick pipes about 20 feet away, she saw movement. A figure. Crushed low. Watching. It was a man. Pale face. Matted hair. Clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. He stared at her through the gap in the doors, his eyes reflecting the dim emergency light like an animal's. Maya screamed. She threw herself at the control panel, hitting every button, clawing at the emergency phone that was still dead. Help! Somebody help! The man stood up slowly. He was tall. Too tall for the low ceiling, so he hunched, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. He took a step toward the elevator. Maya's hands found the inner accordion gate and pulled with everything she had, trying to force the doors closed, but they wouldn't budge. The man was 10 feet away. 5. She could smell him now, sweat and rust and something sore. He reached out toward her. And the elevator jolted. The doors jerked closed with a screech of metal. The cabin shot upward so violently Maya fell against the back wall. The lights flickered, the panel went haywire, numbers flashing randomly, 73926. Then it stopped. Lobby. The doors opened onto the familiar fluorescent-lit lobby. Empty. Safe. Normal. Maya stumbled out, gasping, her legs barely holding her. She ran to the front doors, shoved them open, and burst into the cold night air. She called 911 with shaking hands. The police found him 3 hours later. Vincent Hale, 34. Wanted for assault in 2 counties. He'd been squatting in the building's sub-basement for at least 3 months, accessing it through old service tunnels that connected several buildings in the complex. He'd been tampering with the elevator control system, rewiring circuits, overriding buttons. He'd done it before in other buildings. Lure people down to the basement level. Trap them. The police wouldn't say what he'd done to his previous victims, but Maya saw it in their faces. She didn't ask. They told her she was lucky. The elevator's emergency override had kicked in at the last second. Probably a failsafe triggered by the weight sensors, or maybe just random chance. Maya didn't feel lucky. She quit the delivery job that week. Found daytime work at a coffee shop instead. Better hours. Better tips. No old buildings. But sometimes, late at night, she'd think about that elevator. About the breathing in the dark. About the shadow in the camera's reflection that was there before she ever went down to the basement. She thought about Mrs. Chen's words. Circuits don't breathe. And she thought about the scariest thing of all, the thing that kept her awake some nights. How many times had she used that elevator before? How many times had she stood in that cabin alone while Vincent Hale watched from the sub-basement, his hand on the control panel, deciding whether or not to bring her down? How many times had she been chosen but not taken? The police said the elevator's erratic behavior was all him. The stops on dark floors. The doors opening to empty hallways. The sudden descents. But Maya remembered the shadow in the camera. The one that appeared before the basement. The one that stood behind her when the cabin was empty. She never told the police about that. Some things can't be explained. Some things live in the space between the mechanical and the impossible. And some old buildings have more than one kind of ghost. Safety tips for old elevators. After everything that happened, Maya made herself a list. She kept it in her phone's notes. She's shared it with friends. Maybe it'll help you too. Never use old elevators alone late at night. If you have to, take the stairs. Your legs will forgive you. Trust your instincts. If an elevator feels wrong, if it's stopping on floors you didn't press, if the lights are flickering, if something just feels off, get out. Don't wait to find out why. Know where the emergency button is. Test it if you can. Some don't work. If an elevator takes you to an unmarked floor or a basement you didn't select, don't get out. Jam all the buttons. Make noise. Use your phone's flashlight. Keep your phone charged. And tell someone where you're going. Report strange behavior to building management immediately. Don't assume someone else will. But most importantly, listen to the people who live there. When old Mrs. Chen tells you the elevator has a mind of its own. She's not being superstitious. She's survived longer than you in that building. She knows what she's talking about. The scariest things aren't the ones we imagine in the dark. They're the ones we've learned to ignore.